point, and that needs to be made, we're talking about ha-arah, which we haven't made. Go back quickly. It's about a third to the bottom of the page. Ma'am, the line starts with the word maskil. Okay.
Why is it so important that we get ha-arah correctly? Because we keep really digging into it.
Number one, the answer to that is when you learn Torah, you're supposed to understand what you learn.
Yeah.
Whatever you learn. But truly, clearly in Chassidus, there is another emphasis in terms of, you say, what's so significant. Like I told you, your man asked me, what did the Rebbe want with AyinBase? Remember I told you? What did the Rebbe want with AyinBase? Such depth. What's the point? You can't bring it into our Veda. What did the Rebbe want with AyinBase? And this is a young who learned Chassidus, a lot of Chassidus. So I said the Rebbe wanted that we should be able to relate to the course directly, not through any kind of a conduit and a kind of process and logic. So we should be able to open up our mind directly later. So he says, so what do you get out of this? So I started to laugh. Sechel ha-Adam. So in Chassidus, in every word of Chassidus, there is this element. Number one, you do not understand etzem. You don't understand properly the use of ha-arah. Number two, ha-arah enables you to relate to etzem. Through ha-arah is what illuminates your path towards the etzem. Towards the etzem, as we shall see. Okay, so I'm starting from the line beginning by maskil komeo. It's about a third from the bottom of the page. Amen. Interesting nuance over here, so I don't want to skip that, and it's significant. The Rebbe explains that the hashpoah Rav Talmid is only ha-arah. And it has a very powerful, very significant effect on the machshavah. It actually formulates his keli of Sechel. Nevertheless, it does not actually bestow Sechel to him. It can only be effective if he has Sechel and if he opens to the reception of this Sechel. Now he says, "V'zeo gamkin hatav." This too explains the reason. Machshavah b'bchinas hagbola. In the fact that it comes in a hagbola form. The yoisei ha-arah levad, being that it is only ha-arah. Being that it is only ha-arah, this is why it has hagbola. And then he goes on and says, the chol etzem hu bilti mugbal. Because an etzem is not mugbal. The koyach hatzmi ein nichle koyach liyela. An essential koyach, an etzem koyach, his koyach never ends. Avama shehu ha-arah levad, but this which is only ha-arah, yichle v'yifsa koyach. That ha-arah, its koyach will end. Okay, so there are. Superficially, you could learn that the Rebbe is simply explaining that the ha-arah has a hagbola by definition, because a ha-arah inherently has a hagbola. But initially, when the Rebbe presents it, He says, "V'zehu gamkin hatam." This is also the reason machshavah b'chinas hagbola, the fact that it comes by hagbola. In other words, the union that it has that there is a hagbola in this is not, so to speak, an inadvertent fact that ha-arah has a hagbola. A ha-arah, properly to be a ha-arah, has to have hagbola. It's not just an outcome of its own limits, but it has to be, in order to serve as a ha-arah, it has to have a hagbola. What's the meaning behind this? What's the pshat? Ha-arah has to be hagbola. It's just a slight step off. When the Melech issues a decree, and all the people follow this decree, okay, in complete perfection, complete obedience. What actually happens there is, and in Chad we speak about the meaning of Melech, the people and the Melech are one thing. The people and the Melech are one thing. This is why they follow through, because they are one thing. The whole mitzvah of the Melucha is the Melech. Like Rashi says, Ha-nosi hu ha-koil. The Nosi is everything. So therefore, when the Melech issues a decree, it isn't that you obey the decree. Since that you and the Melech is one thing, then automatically you obey the decree. It's not an obedience. The way we perceive it, B'chitzoyni, it seems obedience. But really, the beetle to the Melech is Torah. Like we pointed out many things last week and so forth. Everybody knows the point, which is to sense and understand the significance of this. Hashpoas as Sechel, for example. Yes, indeed, the Rav is mashpia Sechel to the Talmud, and it is his Sechel, and he has an effect on the Talmud to the point that the Talmud's clear Sechel formulate according to the Sechel of the Rav, but he doesn't intend to make him the Rav, to own him. This Talmud ultimately has to take the Sechel and understand it on his own, in his own case. This is why a ha-arah must have a hagbola.
In contrast to the king.
In contrast, I'm just going to give a more in contrast to the king.
In contrast.
The ha-arah must have a hagbola. Because the whole premise of the ha-arah is to effectuate and bring the Sechel Rav to a Talmud. The Talmud should have the Sechel, not the Talmud should become the Rav. This is what we pointed out many times. The Melech, he has an etzem like we learned Friday night in the Sechel. This is a reality. And the beetle to the Melech is complete, and hence this explains also. Need more elaboration, but basically our relationship with the Meibush. Our relationship with the Meibush is not a relationship. Somebody once said to me, he says, I work so hard to have a relationship with the Meibush. I said, relationship? You can't have a relationship with the Meibush. What kind of guy says this? Where do you ever hear such a term? Again, this misunderstanding. And this is a man who learned Chassidus and did Avodah for years. Where are you coming from? A relationship with the Meibush. You can have a relationship with a teacher, with a friend, not with the Meibush. Even at the lowest level, the Melech, you can't have a relationship with the Melech. If a person just makes a remes in the presence of the king, he is out. But the ha-arah must have a halbal. And that's what it says, Zehu gamkin hatam shehu mugbal. This is the reason why it's mugbal. The Rav is giving ha-arah Sechel to the Talmud, and all he wants is that the Talmud should understand the Sechel, and not he should become like the Rav or the Rav. And only in order to accomplish that facilitate, it has to be ha-arah. What's a ha-arah? We explained many times, and now perhaps
what does the ha-arah facilitate?
In order to facilitate this type of transmission, it has to be a ha-arah.
What's the difference between having a relationship with the melech and relating directly to the melech? Like you said in your story about the younger man.
You don't relate. You say relating means that you recognize, you don't relate. The relationship with the king is not a relationship where you are an entity and the melech is an entity. You are completely swallowed up by the presence of the king. There is nothing else. In the presence of the king, there is nothing else. There is only the king.
Is that the same thing as what you said about in the story about the younger man? To relate directly to Elikus?
In a certain sense, yes, because here we're still talking about seeing Elikus on the Chochmah level, on Sechel level. We're not talking about the Gili Hamalchut. This is the Osid Lovin, but the Sechel should see Elikus directly. So it's still not the same thing.
Okay.
I don't know, I was in the middle of something. Okay, I was explaining this is why it has to be Bahagbola. Because ha-arah means ha-arah means a reflection of. What is the principle of a reflection? How is it? What's the how define a reflection? So, for example, we say all the time lately, great emphasis: a human being is be'etzem a human being. This is reflected in how he acts. In every aspect. The element, the essential element of the human is reflected in how he acts. In other words, the ha-arah of that etzem, of that truth, illuminates his whole path. It has an effect. The same thing in ha-arah, I'm saying ha-arah from the sun. The sun, we say, is brightness. How do you translate brightness in a world that is dark? You bring light to it, so that you could see. You don't make it brightness in essence, but you can see. That's with the ha-arah. It's a reflection. It's a practical, a functional element of the etzem. That's with the ha-arah. And the same thing is in from Sechel. The Sechel on Av is a ha-arah of the Sechel, and that's the way it's mashpia. It's a ha-arah of the etzem ha-sechel. Just as we say that because of Sechel, a person behaves in a certain way, what does the Rav teach the Talmud? It teaches him how to behave. How do you understand various things? How do you relate to certain circumstances?
How does that, you mentioned in the beginning that this leads the person in his derech towards the etzem. How does giving over these functional, limited ha-arahs, how does that lead the person to the etzem?
The first principle, we said, I'll step back a minute. We said before that how does a Talmud learn Sechel from the Rav? he has to have his own Sechel, and he has to dedicate, he has to want to learn the Sechel. If he doesn't want to learn the Sechel, he's not going to learn. If a Talmid sits in the Rav and he's listening to the Sechel and he knows what the Rav says, but he doesn't really want to be affected by it. I don't want to become a Chassid. I don't want to become a formulate. I like to listen to it. If there's any resistance, he'll never understand. I once heard in the name of Rabbi Soloveitchik, Soloveitchik, was a genius. The Rebbe held from him. He said, but in order to learn anything, whatever it is that you study, you have to be totally engrossed in it. Now, you have to really want to learn it. What you're going to do with it afterwards is a separate thing. There has to be a reason why you want to learn it. But you have to be, otherwise you're not really getting it. Okay. Okay, what was the question?
How does it lead a person in his derech towards the Atzim?
Okay, there's the Atzim. So, okay. So here's the point. In order for a person to get in touch with the Pnimis, with his own Atzim, number one, the biggest obstacle is the Chitzonius of the world in which he lives. The biggest obstacle. He doesn't see himself, doesn't see his nefesh in the world. How do you, number one, prepare the environment, the world, that the world should be able to allow you to relate to your nefesh? This is by learning how to treat the world, how to behave in the world. This behavior is chitzonius. This is the keder for the pnimis. This is why this ha-arah is extremely important. I don't have to elaborate on this, it's clear. I mean, sometimes from time to time we elaborate on it, but the answer to your question, this is how it leads. It opens up a gateway to the nefesh.
And then his own nefesh, he can find, when he has a keli, in other words, when there's a gateway open, then his own nefesh, he could send something.
Yeah, there's a word, the Friedrich Rebbe once, I don't remember about which Chassid, he said that one Rabbi pointed to a Chassid, and he said that he is Chochem be'etzem koyach chachmos. That's how you express it. He is a Chochem, but his Sechel is at the level where when he thinks as Sechel, he doesn't think with Sechel, with a functioning Sechel, but be'etzem koyach chachmos. How did he get to that? By applying the ha-arah. And eventually, you reach the Atzim Koyach Hashem. Right, that's the answer to your question. Okay, so this is the point here, and the Rebbe says, that this is B'Hagbolah. This is the reason why it's B'Hagbolah. In other words, it has to be Hagbolah. It's not an inadvertent fact that the ha-arah has a Hagbolah. This is what we explained, that light does not eliminate darkness, it illuminates darkness. So that when you see things now with light, you are seeing things while the essential state of the world is dark, and you see it despite the darkness, because there is light. It's an active functional element. This is the ha-arah. And that's why it has to be Hagbolah. If it is not the Hagbolah, then it won't illuminate anything. It'll just eliminate the darkness.
Like day.
Huh?
Like day, like the sun.
Day is we have day, but that's not the illumination. That's like the Oyer Shenivra B'Yem Rishon. Oyer Shenivra B'Yem Rishon says that Yevshel and Leil Hishtamish together with Cheshvan. It couldn't be together. Why not? You illuminate the darkness. That oil eliminated darkness.
what you said. It's the etzim. It's not a ha-arah.
That's why it's not hard.
Uh-huh.
And Gonzil is tzaddikim yosef lo. Okay. So to demonstrate the union that the oil is behakbola, and our oil is Amashu ha-arah levad yichled yipsek koichi. And when it has the line, I'm going back and forth a little bit. That which is a ha-arah, its koyach will end at some point. And this is the ultimate. There's a benefit from that. There's an ultimate function of the ha-arah, that it illuminates but does not eliminate. It illuminates and shows you the gashmi, but it shows you the gashmi. Doesn't eliminate it. V'hu al derech moshol oir haneir. And this is like the moshel of oir haneir, the light of a candle. Shenikla koyach is pashtuse, the koyach of its spreading forth of its illumination ends at some point. Sheine meil merochik. It cannot shine to a great distance. I started explaining last time. Why not? What's obstructing the light from spreading indefinitely? The answer is the light has a definitive function. I want to illuminate this area. I don't want to illuminate the entire world. That's my hard. I don't want to change the world. I just want that this area should be able to be used in light, should be able to exist. That's light. That way he has an end. וגם אור האבוקו שמספשת.
What's the order? The light or the candle, as it says?
The light. The light from the candle is a ha-arah.
The light says I don't want, or the candle says I don't want a light.
Well, it happens that the candle fire is a limited thing. The intent of the light, the intent that the candle creates the light, and the intent is a limited intent, and that's why there's a limit to its ispashtus.
One would think that it's better to illuminate the entire world, illuminate a huge light, than
Say again?
I'm saying one would think that it's more beneficial to have a light that's going to illuminate the world, rather than just a limited area. Yet we're stressing the maila, or the function in eliminating a small area.
Right. Again, you're an assistant to understand this. The answer, Yehuda, is this. The kavana of the Bria. And there should be oil mitei ha-cheshach. We'll have a chance now to discuss it, but essentially, it is not the darkness that we are fighting. It is the fact that the darkness prevents us from knowing the truth, from knowing where does it come from. And the function of the light is that in the darkness you should recognize that there is a creator. Like we spoke yesterday, that a human being, with his intellect, that's the prime function of the intellect, he brings light into the darkness. Like when we encounter an object in the darkness, what is our focus? What are we trying to identify in the object? Is it wood or iron or steel? Or what are we trying to identify? What does the object look like? Because that's our focus. Because Abba Sechel looks at the Sechel of everything, even in that, and is the Kabbalah's of as we shall see. Which, besides, as we shall see, I'm sure every one of you has been exposed to that idea to some degree. V'gav gam oir hashemesh, and even the light of the sun that has a tremendous spread.
Or havuka? Do we do the prince?
Yeah, I said gam oir havuka, the light of a flame, of a big flame. Havuka means a torch. Huh? Shemispashet yosef, that spreads more. Even there, the koyach of its pashtus ends, because the whole idea of his pashtus is to be mispashet and leave the presence alone, not to change it. V'av gam oil hashemesh, and even the light of the sun, that you would think that the sun actually, as we said before, we said many times, the sun rules the day. Nevertheless, the oil, the light that he brings, its effect of illumination is not equal the way it is lamayl, closer to the sun, or lamata, the way it is further down. Just as there are differences from the heat, in the heat element that the sun produces, the mikorev husoirev, that from close by it actually burns, not warms, it burns. And it is known that there are gimel avirim that give three different levels in avir, in the space in between us and the sun. I don't know the gimel avirim exactly how they divide it. And the similar thing is in the oil, that there is a difference, just like in the heat, the oil also is different as it goes, it spreads out further. The hainu, and the point in all this, because she calls ha-arah, because that this, all of these elements, the light of the candle and the avuka and the sun, is a ha-arah, which means it is a functional element and has a functional definition. That's why its koyach ends and it ultimately interrupted. Nichle, I would think, is that it introduced gradually, and ultimately is nifsak, it terminates. Ultimately, this is what we are trying to point out, that the similar thing is Vashpoas HaSechel. Being that the Hashpoas HaSechel is only a ha-arah, Al Kain Hu B'Bchinas Hagbolah. Therefore, it has an element of Hagbolah. Hashpoas HaSechel, as we said many times, and here is where we are going to be focused on this principle. Hashpoas HaSechel, in contrast to Limud HaSechel, or teaching.
I'm sorry, as opposed to what?
To teaching, Limud.
Limud.
He said it many times. The word hashpoa is used in a very meaningful manner. Hashpoa means that it's not I'm just giving you something but I am trying to affect that you should accept it. That's mean hashpor. This is what is explained in Chassidus, that Rav is teaching a Talmud, or a father teaching a son. There's great significance in what is their personal relationship. If the Rav or the father has a special interest, a special feel for the son or for the Talmud that he's teaching, because he really wants to benefit him with this Sechel, that's called hashpor. And then his hashpor is a totally different. His teaching is totally different now. He will produce a Sechel in a manner that the Talmud will be able to absorb it, to relate to it, and he will constantly sense whether the Talmud is where the Talmud is up to. Because he relates directly to the Talmud, even though it's Sechel. As we said before, he doesn't eliminate the Talmud. The Talmud remains a separate entity, but he senses that the Talmud actually relates to the Sechel. This means hashpor. So therefore, hashpor's Sechel is that he's actually trying to bestow and affect the Sechel into the Talmud. Nevertheless, it is a ha-arah levad. It is only a ha-arah of the Sechel Horav. Even though the Rav really wants to give the Talmud his entire Sechel. But how do you give it? Ha-arah levad. He doesn't want to absorb the Talmud. He wants the Talmud to absorb his Sechel.
You're emphasizing this morning, though, this ha-arah levad. It sounds like the expression ha-arah levad is like a qualification. It's only a ha-arah. You're saying actually the fact that it's a ha-arah is a mila, not a concern.
Yes, it's a mila in terms of what the function of hashpor's Sechel is.
Because if it weren't a ha-arah, there would be no Talmud left.
There will be no Talmud left, right? I hate to bring it in, but before I give you this story, I have to kind of explain. There's a place and there are certain moments when you're not allowed to learn. And in those places, there are all kinds of different things that you could occupy your time with. One of the, for many years, I occupied my time in those places reading Shakespeare. And there's a lot of insights there. So in one of the plays, if you're interested, I'll tell you which play. He has this following illustration. He says a doctor took a patient who was totally incapable and lost all his faculties. He lost all his faculties. And the doctor dealt with this patient and slowly brought back all his faculties. Restored him back to health, except for one. The will. The will he retained to himself. So the will of this patient is the will of the doctor. Whatever the doctor wants, that's what the patient wants. So this is what's an illustration, whatever you're trying to understand. In other words, the Rav does not want to take the will away from the Talmud. On the contrary, he wants to teach him only if he wants to learn. He wants to arouse the will, he wants to encourage, he wants to give him the thing, but he doesn't want to take the will away from him. He's not going to imbue the Sechel in him despite the fact that he doesn't want to learn. That's not his intent.
What could Rav do to take away his will or not to take away his will? What does he do differently?
Okay, another time.
It's important. It sounds like an important principle for parents also. In other words, when dealing with your child, they could either overwhelm them or, and kind of trying to get them to do what you want. Or
okay, the Rambam gives us a very, very clear method, a clear illustration of this principle. You want to teach a child, and the Rambam is not. The Rambam is pretty harsh. I mean, the mother says, your child, if he doesn't want to learn, you have to hit him. You have to hit him, and you have to help him at the same time. And you have to reward him for having learned. And you have to bribe him, depending on the age of the child, with all kinds of different things. Rambam says at first you give him candy, then you give him money, and then you give him covet, depending on the age of the child.
How does all this relate to the Rebbe and the Chassid?
Baruch, we have to make a demarcation line between learning and Fabrengen. The ha-arah is nifsek here, right? Rebbe and a Chassid is really a different story. Totally different story. So, hashpaz ha-sechel again is hashpaz ha-sechel. Nevertheless, it's a ha-arah levat. Why? Because he wants a Talmid to have Sechel on his own. Al kein hu b'bchinas hagbola. This is why it has an element of hagbola. Here's the parentheses. Yet still, tzorich loymar. We have to ultimately say the sibas ha-hagbola who that the cause for this hagbola, that there's hagbola in the ha-arah, is gamkein includes also another cause. Lefi shebo alidei tzimtzum. It is due to the fact that it comes, the hashpah comes through a tzimtzum. In other words, we're saying that the hagbola is due to the fact that it's a ha-arah, and therefore the ha-arah is automatically mugbal. He says, we nevertheless have to say that there is another cause for this hagbola, and that is because shebol adei tzimtzum, because it comes to a tzimtzum. In other words, when the Rav is mashpia the Sechel, he is not mashpia the Sechel the way he has it for himself. He mashpia the Sechel through the process, through the filter of a tzimtzum. The oil shehu bechinas gilehu etzem mamosh, because an oil that is a true and complete revelation and expression of the etzem. Sheloy adei tzimtzum. If it comes not through the filter of a tzimtzum. In other words, if the Rav were to say this Sechel, but he was going to say the Sechel not with intent that you should understand, not the intent of hashpah, he would say the Sechel the way it is by him. Lo adei tzimtzum. Even though it's also still a ha-arah, he is only expressing the Sechel, it's a gilui, but if it comes to the tzimtzum, areihu kmei ho'etzem b'bchinas ein sof. Oyer, that is Gilu Ho'etzem, is like the Ho'etzem. B'bchinas Ein Sof, it still retains the quality of Ein Sof. If I would try to put this a little bit in words. We should understand how do you identify, distinguish between these two. This is also Gili Ho'er from the Etzem, but it goes to a Tzimtzum, whereas this is an oil that comes from the Etzem, and Gili the Bechina says Etzem Mamash, Gili Etzem Mamash. Here's hopefully we can focus and relate to the following. Going to Chokhmah and from going to sight. You always point out sight and Chokhmah are on par, have equal effect, except sight is on Gashmis and Chokhmah is in Ruchnis. And that's why sight is a tremendous insight. It gives us a tremendous insight in what's going on in Nefesh Olam. And sight actually is dependent on the Chokhmah. In sight, there is the following phenomenon. We observe something because it's observable, it's visible. So we observe it. We cannot but see it. It's right there in front of your eyes. However, the real experience of sight is not that we cannot but see it. We have a proactive relationship to what we see. Immediately upon first encountering it in sight, we see something. In other words, we see something that makes sense. We try to make sense. There is a certain element of means of absorption of what you see. Even though sight, as I said, we can't ignore it. Sight is not something that is imposed upon you, that forces you to see. Sight is a koyach that you are engaged in seeing. You can relate to what you see. This inyan, that you can relate to what you see, means that you do not see the inyan as it is unto itself, even though that's what sight is. You see the inyan from the perspective of what's being shown to you. What does it mean? It's an interesting principle. The Baal Shem Tov says that whatever Ayin sees, these words that Baal Shem Tov doesn't say, but he takes for granted. If Ayin sees, he has to realize that he's being shown. Doesn't see it accidentally. Doesn't see it just because it's there. He sees it because Bashgoh is being shown. And he has to see it from that angle. What is he being shown and why is he being shown? This is the pshat that you see the oil as it is being nishpa, it's being given to you. There's a tzimtzum element. But I'm trying for you to see such and such that you're able to see. If it is a gilui ha'etzem mamash, shalayad tzimtzum. If it is to be seen from the angle, from the perspective of just the fundamental truth of the singing, then it actually doesn't have a hagbala. This is a mashal to what we're going to explain in Sechel ha-arah.
I'm sorry, then it doesn't have what?
A hagbala.
So then what's the difference in the experience in terms of what you just said? You don't feel you're being shown it?
Yeah, you do feel it being shown. That's how we see things.
That's the Hagbala.
That's right.
Well, what if it's not the Hagbala?
It is always Bahagbala.
thought you were contrasting this with something.
I'm saying if it were not Bahagbola, it would be a completely different vision. It so happens that when we see things, we are seeing it in a certain context. When the Rav is presenting a Sechel to the Talmud, and this is Sechel ha-arah. In other words, the Talmud is a Talmud. He is not sitting there trying to challenge his Rav. He's sitting there to try to get as much as he can from them. So the Rav really can present to him the Sechel the way he sees it. This is what I see. But he doesn't do that. He always will present to him a Sechel in a manner that the Talmud can relate to it. In other words, it will make sense to him something. The Rav is above that. The Rav does not need, he doesn't see the Sechel because it makes sense. He sees the Sechel because that's the Etzem, that's the truth. This is how he sees the Sechel. And if he were to give that to the Talmud, then it would be big book. Then the Talmud would not really be able to have the means by which to absorb it, no matter how dedicated he is. The Rav does not present it this way. He presents him a Sechel with the means of absorption, with kelim, in other words, first he presents him, he is what makes sense. And he is what is beyond making sense. This is pointing to another level of truth. But he's presenting it to him in a manner of presentation. This is the tzimtzum. He does not give the Sechel to the Talmud in the full glory the way he sees it. This is the truth. That's how the Rav sees it. This is the difference. The distinction between a Rav and a Talmud. Talmud could be very, very bright. Why is he a Rav and he a Talmud? Why can't the Talmud figure out on his own? You learn, you figure out on his own. Like you always say, you figure out on your own. You put two and two together, you figure out the types of the words, and you'll know it. The Ayin of the Rav is that the Rav sees the Sechel from its inception. Not because it makes sense, but because he is trying every which way to bring it down in a manner that makes sense. But that's not the Etzem HaSeichel. Making sense is a means to relate to the Seichel. Etzem HaSeichel, this is the way the Neshama sees it. This is the truth of the Nefesh.
Sounds like a really hard job.
This is what he says.
Etzem HaSeichel means it doesn't come through a process of logic.
Right.
So why is it called Seichel?
Because it's a Gili HaNefesh from Koyach HaMaskil. There are different levels. There's the Nefesh, Etzem HaNefesh, the Koyach HaYulin, the Koyach HaMaskil. It has the element of Seichel. It has the element of light. But in this light, like we said many times, like we said, daylight. Daylight is also light, but it's a completely different light. It's not a light that you say, oh, it's daylight, I could see across the street. The daylight is to illuminate. It's not meant to illuminate. This is the reality. I don't remember where it's explained, discussed. Friedrich read that thing. He says, now, what is the difference between the Rishonim, the Gdei Yisrael, the Rishonim, the Rambam, and the Rif? I mean, the Rishonim and Achronim. You know, we have the Rishonim and Achronim. If you take a look, there are responses. The Rambam has responses. The Rif has responses. The Rif is the Rambam's Rebbe. The responses, if people ask Shilas and they give them an answer. Then you take a look at the responses by the Achronim. Van the Neder Yehuda was a tremendous genius, a tremendous rov. If you take a look at the neighborhood van Shilas and Tshuva, every Tshuva the tshuva is 5 pages. Take a look at the tshuva from Reeve, 5 lines, if that much. If that much. The Rambam, we have this Rambam La'am, a wonderful, wonderful piece of work. And at the end, there is they bring down certain shuvas from Rambam. So these people learn it, learn them, they present the shaila. The shaila is 10 times as long as the tshuva. The tshuva is clear. So the Rambam says the difference between the Rishonim and Acharonim is the difference between being in a lit up in a light. In light, when you come into a room, you immediately go to the place where you have to go. You see it right away. In the darkness, you have to feel your way around, and that takes a long time.
So which words are you explaining with these?
The gili who adds etzem sechel.
That would be like the being in the light.
Being in the light. The Eshu who is gili who etzem mamos. If the yoyer is gili who etzem, we always have to remember. And here's an important point, a moment to reflect on this, which we always say: Sechel is not a technical function. There is a big difference between Sechel and machshavah. Machshavah is only a keli for Sechel. A thought process. Sechel is the concept behind it. Is the oil ha-nefesh. Having said that, I want to give you a little bit of a food for thought. There's something which we take very clearly for granted. Logic is logic. If I can prove something logically, it says, if this is such and then this is such and this is such, nobody can challenge logic. It seems almost that logic is not seichel, that this is just a fact. I'd like you to understand what is really behind the process, the power of logic. And why is it so engaging? Logic is a factual demonstration, or experiencing an element that is a profound recognition of the human sechel. And this recognition, human sechel, goes even higher than sechel. It goes into the rotzen ha-nefesh. What is the recognition? The recognition is, the rotzen ha-nefesh, is that everything is whole and perfect. There cannot be contradictory effects. Everything comes from one source, Matzirish. And this source provides for everything. If there are 2 objects in the world, there are 2 places for them. Why? Because that's what the Creator provided. This is the reality of the nefesh. The nefesh insists, no, there's complete perfection. Everything has the right to be because its creator gave it the right to be. And if he has the right to be, he has a place to be.
You're describing Ratzon right now?
That's what I'm saying. This comes from a Ratzon, and it reflected in the Sechel. In Chochmah, this is what logic is. This principle, logic is very clearly applicable. Mm. So logic really is a function of a nefesh, of the truth of the nefesh. of a living nefesh.
Logic is a function of truth of living nefesh. Oh, because these two objects could not be in one place, not on account of the place, but on account of the nefesh.
That's right. They're not fighting. They are providing for us.
They're being provided for?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's not a rule of time and space that two objects cannot be in the same place at the same time. It's a nefesh rule.
It's a nefesh rule.
Uh-huh.
This is such stupidity. It's idiocy. Make idiots out of us. Everything, there's a Motzurish, and he provides the infinite provision for everything. Everything has a right to be, and therefore it has a place.
And that's why it turns out that two things don't. Okay,
so you take it when you forget about this truth and say, oh, they each fought for their right to be. That's the way they look at it.
Right.
And this is why he occupies space. You can't be in my space. If you come, I'm going to throw you out.
Using logic, though, it depends on where the source of in other words, if the logic is flowing from Ratzon, and the principle that there's a Motzei Rishon, then it's a living logic. But if the logic can also be based on the reality of the world, and people have logic.
That's not logic.
That's not logic.
It's not logic. It's just, like I say, the lion claims this is his turf. Is that logic?
But the laws of physics say.
Laws of physics is the same thing. Laws of physics is laws provided by the creator of the world.
Okay. So what, yeah.
These are laws that are derivatives of the truth, that what? Everything has a place. Ein lechom lover she'ein lo mokim, the Gemara says. There's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos.
And Masha Elo Makom?
Ein dover she'ein lo mokim.
Uh-huh.
I just mentioned the other day, they have discovered an ingenious, the greatness of human mind. You can go and think outside of the box.
Yeah, right.
Wow, what a discovery. Really, logically, you should be only thinking outside the box, because you are the base of all reality. You should be able to think only that which is inside your box. But no, you can think outside of the box. You're really something very special. How did you ever discover that? I don't know.
Must have been thinking out of the box.
Right.
That's why the tefillin have a source. They go beyond the box.
Okay, this is what the Rabbi explains. This is where we're up to now. I'm going back to the beginning of the parenthesis. We really deviate a lot, but we have now a handle on what is being said. The Komakim still tzorich lema. We must still say the Sibas HaHagbola Hu Gamkein, that the cause for the Hagbola in the ha-arah is also the Fi Shebo Al Dei Tzimtzum, that ultimately it comes to the Tzimtzum. Because even the ha-arah, even the oir Shuhu Bechinas Gili Ho'etzem Mamash. Oir is Gili. Oil means I'm revealing what's doing in the etzem. But if the oil is bechinas gilu etzem mamash, is a full revelation of the etzem itself, shaloi al de tzimtzum, not through a tzimtzum. In other words, this oil is being yizgal the way it is in the etzem, not for the purpose of anybody agreeing with him. He's not mashpia anything. He's just saying what he thinks. Harei hu k'mei ho'etzem. That oil is like the etzem bibchinas ein sof. It is still bibchinas ein sof. It has the elements of ein sof. Like we said before, by the Rab, this Sechel is not based on reason. It's based on the perception of the truth. The nefesh is a godly presence. This is the infinite truth. And the Sechel is an emanation from that. If the Sechel comes from there with Tara Tzimtzum, then he has no limit. B'chinas ein sof.
Isn't the fact that the Rav put it into words and said it over already at Tzimtzum?
Yes. Putting into words, it depends what you mean words. There's a statement, kosher posel. That's not putting into words. But if he's putting into words, since that he has these qualities, therefore it is kosher. Or since he doesn't have this quality, that's a completely different presentation. It reminds me of an experience that I had. This was back in Brunois, believe it or not. There were boys in Brunois. I don't know if it was a mitzvah or not. So we shechted kaporas, and one boy in the found that the kapora had some kind of a blemish, some kind of a boil, a hit, some kind of a
Tumor?
No. It got hit with something.
Blemish.
A blemish, some kind of a bruise. And then at that time there was an old Rav who came. He was there for the summer. The Rav was a very nice summer resort, and he was staying in a house just above up the hill. An old Rav. He was mamish bedridden. It was an old Rav. As a matter of fact, we went to make a meeting for him, and I davened over there. I was a big chazan in Kippur. He was an older, he was sitting in the bed, so we came to him with the shiloh on this chicken. So he sat up, and he took this chicken and started looking, poking until his finger came right out on the other side of this damage, of this hole. And he said, if there's this hole, then the chicken cannot live. He didn't say it's straight. He said, kann es nicht leben? Kann es nicht leben?
So what the point was the plan? This is the point.
He put it in Sechel terms.
He put it in Sechel terms. He explained himself.
But if a Rav says, without any logic, just tzad, that's a mamish? That's not ha-arah?
Well, the Rav could say it's a result of the whole process. The Gemara says that there was a ma'aseh with Rav. Rav was a big Rav. And there was a whole discussion. And Rav said a certain halacha. And they asked him all kinds of kashas in his halacha. And he didn't answer, but he did not renege. He didn't just justify his psak. He didn't withdraw it. And he couldn't answer all the questions. So Chassidus explains, and he says an interesting thing, that the halacha ultimately is gepasket according to this statement of Rav, despite the fact that there is kashas galore. So Chassidus says that the Rav saw it from Etzem Perech Sechel, and he couldn't explain it, and he left it hanging. And that is what the halacha turned out to be.
Why? How did they decide that you go along with the Rav?
I'll send you to the Amiroim over there. But this was the Ayin, because this as a Sechel that came from a different directly from the Etzem Perech Sechel, and he couldn't present it in a. He knew that he sensed in his Sechel this is the reality. If you want to see halachas that that will challenge your sense of logic, I'll give you a very simple halacha that we just learned in the Rambam. There's a din for nechosim sheyesh lehem acharayis. Everybody knows what that is? Real estate. Nechosim sheyesh lehem acharayis. Land, ground, earth, ground. Nechosim sheyesh lehem acharayis. They have a special halachas, how you acquire land and so forth. There's one simple halacha. Nechosim sheyesh lehem acharayis. If you buy a piece of land and you want to buy movable objects along with this, you want to acquire them, you can acquire. By acquiring the land, you can acquire the other objects. With the same, it's called kinyan agav. Okay. Now, there's a din about an otzis nokuf. Otzis nokuf means a flower pot that has a hole, and therefore, halachically, it draws its koyach hatzemeach from the earth. This flower pot with a hole has a din of it is attached to the ground, and therefore it has a din of the ground. What has a din of the ground? The plants that are growing there are considered growing out of the ground. The pot itself is clearly movable, but the plants that are growing there are considered growing out of the ground.
Even if it's resting on a shelf.
They can rest in the middle of the air. So now, here's a halacha. Okay.
If there's a hole at the bottom of the pot.
Yeah. The whole bottom of the pot. So the plants that are growing there are growing from the ground. These plants have a din of nechosim sheyesh lehem acharayis. The flower pot is a din she'ein lehem acharayis. The plants are growing in there, and nechosim sheyesh lehem acharayis, they're growing from the ground. So, if the owner of the pot and the owner of the plants wants to sell either one of these things, if he says, "I'm selling you the pot," you coin the pot, and through that you be coining the plant, it doesn't work because this is a metaltony. But if he does the opposite, he sells him the plant, and through that you should be coining the pot. You cannot coin the pot. Because this is the Cheshvan sheyesh lehem acharayis. It grows out of the ground. This is the sheyesh lehem acharayis. This is the halach. So I gave this halach a lot of thought. I don't want to go into this. And this is a halacha. This is a halacha in the Torah. There are many things like this. From time to time, I bring up. Sometimes we'll try to discuss it and explain this. But the point is this: that there is etzem koyach ha-sechel, the etzem truth of sechel, because the truth of sechel is not that which is just works out logically because one thing doesn't let the other thing to be in its place, but because there is a godly provision for it, and therefore this represents the truth of the nefesh, the etzem, the rotzen ha-nefesh, and it has in its own truth. And if the Rav should should expect the Sechel at that level, then he has no limit. Okay, this is it for today. Yes.
No, the question, I know there are lots of laws which don't make sense, like Adam Zomerman, but my question was, what tipped the scales in favor of this Rav? Was it because of his prestige? You say, okay, the halacha is always like this rabbi?
No.
Or did the other rabbis suddenly get an insight, like a nevuah of some kind? Oh, that he's right. What led to the final decision? Halacha was
I don't know. I wasn't there.